Chapter 8. Fog on the Barrow Downs.
Fog on the Barrow Downs.
And our first encounter with the Barrow, our first encounter with a real enemy that you have to stab.
Yeah. That can be beaten. That can be beaten by a song.
Right.
Although
it kind of is beaten by a song, right?
Not really. No, because basically, Frodo, like in D&D parlance, cast a summoning spell and summoned
Tom Bombadil. Yeah.
So like he's like, no, come down, Tom, help us.
If you can take us back, there's two questions here. If you remember, what were your first impressions of this Barrow Wight encounter when you were young, and what's your impression reading it again, like in terms of first impressions? Just to start this off, I was struck by how the Barrow Wight was not really that described in much detail. It was just kind of a shadow with eyes, basically.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, but I do think though that a lot of times it's way more effective because he kind of did the same thing with the Balrog. But,
right.
But again, it makes it that much. Like I said, I like the open to interpretation because honestly, he doesn't go into much detail about anything evil, really.
I wonder if that's conscious decision.
I mean, if it wasn't, it was still a good move because I think that anything that's scary is way scarier in your imagination than the actual description.
Right.
Let's put it in this way, okay? So you look at Bombadil, right? And like he's got a blue jacket and his boots are yellow and blah 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 blah. I mean, that kind of doesn't sound. It's like that's hard to imagine. I mean, other than like a very cartoonish kind of, blue jacket, yellow boots, right?
Yeah, you know what? Speaking, and this is a holdover from last week's discussion on Bombadil, but like speaking of blue jacket, yellow boots, I actually think that he is in a blue jacket and yellow boots. Last week I said it's because he needed to make green because Bombadil is kind of a nature character.
Right.
But on the other hand, I almost think like, a few years before writing The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien just started rhyming about Bombadil. And, when you're coming up with a rhyme, it just sounded good. It's like,
yeah.
Tom Bombadil was a merry fellow, bright blue his jacket was, and his boots were yellow. It's like his boots are literally only yellow because had
they
to rhyme with
fellow.
What I mean? Like he didn't maybe even put that much thought into it. And so, in retrospect, when we're thinking about Tom Bombadil, we have this insistence: the guy has yellow boots. But is that really even important or necessary to? It's not.
No,
it's
actually not
or anything.
No, it's not. I don't think it is very.
And it
necessary
is quite. It's kind of a little bit cartoonish. Like you don't see Strider wearing yellow boots.
No, but again, he didn't do a whole lot of descriptive anyway. For like other than like very broad generalizations. I mean, I think really.
Yeah, he describes landscapes in detail.
Yeah, and 8 million blades of grass on the way to, and food. He describes weather patterns, right?
He's very English in that way, like always talking about the weather, like slight fluctuations in the barometric pressure will be noted accordingly. But yeah, like you're right. Like we don't really know what Bilbo or Frodo or Sam. I mean, we kind of know what they look like, but he doesn't really go into much detail.
Well, we know that Frodo has a cleft chin, right?
Does he?
Oh, yeah, actually, no, we don't know that yet. I jumped ahead like you did last week, and I read Into the Prancing Pony, and Gandalf actually describes Frodo to Butterbur.
He said he had a cleft chin?
I think like a cleft in his chin. And it like Gandalf.
Oh, man.
You're taller than most, fairer than most. with a cleft in his chin.
In terms of hobbits.
In terms of hobbits, yes.
Okay.
Did I say cleft? But it's something. He described his chin.
You're exposing my ignorance because I don't remember that. A stout little fellow with red cheeks, said Mr. Butterbur solemnly. I think he's quoting what
Gandalf said.
Gandalf said. Yeah. Pippin chuckled, but Sam looked indignant. That won't help you much. It goes for most hobbits. So he's stout with red cheeks. But he says to me, continued Mr. Butterbur with a glance at Pippin, but this one is taller than some and fairer than most, and he has a cleft in his chin, perky chap with a bright eye. Ooh.
Wow, see, I can read. I can read.
So wow, I that particular word never stuck out.
As a Tolkien-esque word?
No, well, I never thought he described facial features on Frodo before, but now I see that.
No, but that's like Frodo has a cleft in his chin, so now we know.
Wait, did Elijah Wood have a cleft in his chin?
He probably did,
Let me see here. Yeah.
Kind of, yeah, he does. He has a little bit of a dent. Yeah, he has. He has enough.
So
I think.
Slight.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, everyone has that level of cleft in their chin, I think, don't they?
Not really.
Okay.
Do you? You can kind of see the little...
Under some certain light, I can't really see it.
So when I was 14, I had way more of a cleft than I have now, but that's okay. I'll take it. Anyway, so on to the Barrow Wights.
Okay, sorry. But anyway, this is a bit of a tangent, but you were making an excellent point, and I think it still holds true that Tolkien chose not to describe evil characters all that much at all. Obviously not Sauron.
Right. Just very basic.
He never describes Melkor in Silmarillion.
No. But I think
other than having a Silmaril in his iron crown or whatever.
Right, but I do think that might be intentional.
I do think it's intentional because he probably thought, like you like we were just insinuating, that leaving the imagination to its own devices is probably the best option in these cases, where if you just suggest a shadow with eyes, the reader is going to fill that shadow, that void, with all its own fears, really.
Right,
their own fears will come out and fill that void of description, rather than if you just laundry list all the scary things. Oh, he's got fangs with blood at the end of the fangs. Razor sharp claws and teeth, and I'm like, that just becomes almost distraction.
It does, and I think, again, I mean, this has nothing to do with Lord of the Rings, but a very effective use in the visual medium of the imagination taking over is Jaws, particularly for the first half of the film, when you never really see the shark. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And when you actually do see the shark, it looks cool. It doesn't look real. You know what I'm saying? So
right.
I mean,
well, yeah. I mean, I think some old movies probably hide the monster, as it were. They do that partly to build suspense, but partly to save expense.
Right. But I mean, again, regardless of why they do it, the sidetrack here, with Jaws, the shark Bruce never worked, or it worked it was very hit and miss, so they couldn't really use it, but.
Are you talking about the mechanical shark?
The mechanical shark, yeah.
Did you just call it Bruce?
Yeah, they call it Bruce.
Oh, they call it Bruce? Yeah. Why'd they call it Bruce?
I can't remember. I can't remember why they called it Bruce, but it's Bruce the shark, or Bruce the Meg, or whatever you want. I think it was a shark.
How do you know this? How do you know these things?
Because I know a lot of useless stuff that if I was on Jeopardy, I'd probably do really, really well. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, now's your chance.
Yeah. But the point is that your imagination fills in the blanks, and I think to add in a long roundabout way, coming back to your initial question, the first time I read the Fog on the Barrow Downs, it was scary. It was kind of like the green light, the creeping hand, the dirty rags, all that stuff, set up this whole kind of really kind of gross feeling scenario that they were in. And it's kind of like this, again, like we had said last week, this is the first time where this became a serious adventure.
Yeah, like a real adventure. And speaking of, Frodo Watch. Remember we were doing Frodo Watch from last week?
This is when Frodo stepped up.
Frodo became the hero of the story, whereas in the past, in the last adventure, which was the initial adventure, where there's actually an element of danger, where there's an attack, where Old Man Willow attacks the hobbits, and Sam distinguishes himself as the one with the resources to kind of fight back against the Old Man Willow. Yeah. In this case, Frodo finally comes into his own, and he becomes the hero that saves these three helpless hobbits.
Now, do you think? Okay, so I haven't heard this discussed, but I'm just going to put this out there. So, do you think that the fact that Frodo woke up and really didn't have? Do you think the fact that he carried the ring and that the Barrow Wights didn't have the if Frodo would have thought about it, he has the artifact to control these things. You know what I'm talking about? Like, you
mean with the ring he could control
with the ring?
Barrow Wight?
Yeah, I mean, like, not to say that he would, but
theoretically, does he have the? I mean, he has the object. It's like he has the Porsche, but can he drive it? Like, does he know how to put it through its paces?
Right, but if you have a Porsche, right, and the other guys don't, I mean, you still are one up on the team, you know what I'm saying? Whether you know how to drive it or not, you know.
But you know what happens to, I mean, speculative. So yeah, let's speculate, because we know what happened on Weathertop when Frodo was tempted and put the ring on. Yeah. And it was almost like he became even more exposed to dark powers, and it's like, would the Barrow Wight attack him more forcefully if he? I don't know. Like, it's
or would, because he's such a low level wight? Do you think that Frodo, again, knowing what he had, if he knew what he had, if he knew what the powers were, he puts on the ring, and granted, it would have been a complete disaster, and I think everything would have ended not too far.
Do you think this is a low level wight though?
I think it's a lower level wight than the Black Riders. You know, I mean, these were. But
is it the same? Because I'm a little confused. I mean, we could actually get into this topic.
So basically, these were evil entities that the Witch King of Angmar, right, basically sent down to these barrows down here, because these were where the Dunedain buried all their high level men. And essentially, he sent these wights to desecrate the
right. Yeah, I kind of
to speak.
I always thought that the Barrow Wights were themselves the spirits, or the dead, the Dunedain, or the kings of, basically like ringwraiths. They were spirits of men who had been corrupted and now haunted these barrows in which they themselves were buried. And then, but it looks like what actually happened was, it's almost like not the Dunedain's fault, in the sense that these are burial mounds from the Dunedain, and then you're right, the Witch King sent these evil spirits down to haunt the Barrow Downs.
Kind of as a warning,
and the spirits inhabited the corpses of the Dunedain. The corpses of the dead Dunedain, so they're undead creatures. Right.
He sent them down as just to keep the men away, the Rangers away. You know, basically it was just kind of
it's almost like a humiliation ritual. Your time is done here, and I'm going to desecrate, like you said, your burial mounds, which were probably almost temples, sacred temples. You know, all these old cultures built. Burial mounds, whether they're you could look at chamber burial mounds in Ireland, or even obviously the pyramids of Egypt. These were supposed to be sacred places to hold the dead, the important dead of their society.
Pyramid of Egypt, those are batteries.
I'm sorry. Yeah, right.
Come on, let's get it right.
They're spacecraft.
Yeah,
and none of this is really spelled out. You have to kind of search through appendices and other things to really know the significance of this, because what the Barrow Wight did to the dead corpse of the Dunedain king that was buried here, and inhabiting it and animating it and kind of haunting that haunting the Barrow, it looks like he was about to do to the hobbits. Like he was like kind of like a spider. It almost reminds me of what Shelob did. You stun your prey, and then you kind of ritualistically wrap it and anoint it, and then suck it dry, and then you can it becomes like a zombie corpse for you to inhabit, animate, and further haunt your.
Well, I think though, again, we talk about the ring wraiths and stuff like that, because there were more wraiths. These are wights, which again, like in D&D, there is a difference. You know what I'm saying? But
wights is just like a ghost, right? Or
yeah. Wights like
the Middle English word, a wight.
Yeah.
Let me just look that up. So it's archaic. It's an old word that basically means a spirit or a ghost or a supernatural being.
Right. Which is how they're described. And again, like you said, I don't know how much of the Dunedain they actually inhabited, so to speak, like possessed, as much as they just were there just to haunt, and not.
Speaking of doing research, I was looking at this old Tolkien bestiary.
That's like that old Tolkien bestiary. That is like not very like that is like if you go on to any kind of serious Tolkien scholar, which I have that book, I love it, but they think that dude's kind of full of shit.
Well, the scholarship might not be completely accurate. I think he took liberties. I think he even took liberties describing the Barrow Wights,
right?
Because he's the one that said that these are the Barrow Wights, possess the bodies. They're like they're like body snatchers. They're just a spirit that possesses the bodies. That's where I got it from.
Right.
You don't know like if this is because Tolkien only describes it as a shadow, except for the arm thing. Is this arm the undead or almost what is the word, like mummified arm of the old Dunedain king that the Barrow Wight is moving towards the prey? Well, their prey.
Well, there's definitely because Bombadil had to go in and stomp out the hand. Bombadil raised exercised the Barrow, for lack of a better term. But the hand was still there. It was a cut off hand, but it's kind of like hand from what do you call it, from the Addams Family, right?
Yeah, that's
just
what
kind of like crawling around.
There was a loud rumbling of stones rolling and falling, and suddenly light streamed in, real light, the plain light of day. So the attack on the Barrow, it's kind of like I'm saying a few different things here, but this is reminding me of, and I've told you this already, of Bilbo's first encounter with the stone trolls on so many levels, because it's like you're kind of trapped, and then some other figure, whether it's Gandalf or in this case Bombadil, comes in and saves you by releasing light into the picture, into the equation. And with Gandalf, he was like, let the light of day turn you to stone.
Dawn take you all and be stoned to you.
Right. And here, Tom Bombadil, what does he do? He comes in to save these hobbits through an act of like, let there be light. And light streams in. Real light, plain light of day, which has the same effect on the wight as it did on the trolls. I mean, it doesn't turn the wight to stone, but it vanquishes the attack of the wight. As Frodo left the barrow for the last time, he thought he saw a severed hand wriggling still like a wounded spider in a heap of fallen earth. Tom went back again, and there was a sound of much thumping and stamping. Ooh, he's just like beating the hell out of this disembodied hand. When he came out, he was bearing in his arms a great load of treasure. Okay, so not to harp on it too much, but you have in both cases, in Bilbo's encounter with the stone trolls and in Frodo's encounter with the Barrow Wights, what do they get after the light shines forth and vanquishes the enemy? They get swords out of the deal. And in both cases, the swords come from underground burial chambers,
right? And they're magic swords because, honestly, I would say the swords from the Barrow Downs are probably like +2 swords with a chance to cast dispel magic with each shot. You know what I'm saying?
But these are Dunedain swords; they're not Glamdring.
No. But I mean, they're like you said, like Sting was probably had infravision and probably a +4 Vorpal blade, whereas these were like probably +2 with a chance to cast spell because look, he stabbed the Witch King, Mary did in the leg, and it stabbed right through his sinew, and
So these
only
he say
a
that
magic sword could do that?
Doesn't he say that not any blade would be able to do that? Just
one's forged specifically for the fight against the
right, because these were forged in the fight against the Witch King of Angmar.
Yes, and
so therefore they have great power against those particular kinds of foes.
Right. They probably have like a +40 hit against undead.
Against undead whose name starts with W, Ringwraith. Speaking of that, though, this is also, in terms just of the Lord of the Rings, this is the first time that you really get a sense of the age, like Frodo is stepping into history here.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because in the Shire, there was never this sense. It's kind of like. And Tolkien describes the Shire as this place where history and wars are things that happen in faraway places, and they don't really invade the Shire too much. The Shire is like an island of tranquility, but you've left the Shire, and now you're in a place where there's ancient burial mounds, the result of ancient warfare, and we realize now that this is not even the Hobbit anymore. This is a bigger story with a deeper history. I mean, obviously, The Hobbit also has a deeper history, but it's not explicit. It makes explicit the deep history behind The Lord of the Rings.
So I think again we're kind of lumping a bunch of stuff here, and we're kind of jumping all around, but
a little bit.
This right here, this chapter and what happens. I think, like I said, this is. Again, it takes it up takes it up a notch.
That a astute kind of reader of this starts to wonder about when you're in the Barrow Downs, Barrow Wight, Witch King, Dunedain, like all these historical events are brought up as kind of unknowns, but at least they're brought up as question marks. Rather than not brought up at all. And then who do you meet in like the next chapter is Strider, who is like the scion of the line of the Dunedain.
Yeah. I did watch again, like I did a little bit of a between reading and watching The Broken Sword and Lord of the Rings, which are two of my favorites. But again, like talking about the Barrow Wights, I think in Unfinished Tales or whatever that it was stated that the Witch King basically roused all the Wights in September when they actually found out where the Shire was. So it was kind of like a strategic move on.
Right. I actually I saw that too. The same video, I believe.
Probably.
Where do you think he got that information?
Again, I haven't read all the Unfinished Tales, but I want to say that they'd mentioned Unfinished Tales.
It means that the activity of the Barrow Wight, it was like he was activated,
right? But
by the presence of the Ringwraiths who were kind of in the locality,
right? But the other thing is too is like again, there's a reason why these were Unfinished Tales. I mean, it does seem pretty convenient that he would the Witch King would go and activate him when the impression that you get from from reading that is like the Barrow Wights, the Barrow Downs have always been haunted, or from time immemorial. They've they moved in and they didn't need to be roused. You know what I'm talking about?
Do you think that was more of an afterthought of Tolkien? Like, as an author, you write something, and then a few years later, you think, oh, that's probably why this Barrow Wight was activated, because the Ringwraiths were looking for Frodo, and they just happened. But when Tolkien first wrote the scene with the Barrow Wight, he probably wasn't even thinking that there needed to be a justification for the activation of the Barrow Wight. That Barrow Wight could just, like you said, always be haunting those barrows from time immemorial.
Right, but I always felt it's kind of cheap a little bit. It was like, oh, they went and activated these things, where to me, the what Tolkien ended up doing, and again, it's like the Barrow Downs have always been haunted. It gives it a little bit more weight. They've always been haunted. This has always been a place that people avoided. I mean, why else would they avoid it? You know what I'm talking about? I mean,
right. Yeah, there doesn't need to be a reason for the
outside of like the initial,
that information that's coming from that we get from that video, which I'm sure he has like textual evidence for, or back.
Yeah.
That may be the case, but to me, it's kind of unnecessary.
But my point is, like,
because the Barrow Wight is still a manifestation of, or a result of, the war between the Dunedain and the Witch King of Angmar.
Right. But my point is,
he's still there for a reason that's justifiable. Yeah. It's not just
my point. Right, but my point is like with the Unfinished Tales, it's kind of like you've written lyrics in your songs that end up not getting used because like, oh, that doesn't really.
Right.
That doesn't work as well. I mean, the fact that like the Unfinished Tales are there, I mean, it's great, but I think, it was more of like a, Christopher Tolkien was like, oh, I think people would like to read this and see how,
You're right.
this stuff developed into the Lord of the Rings, like the final result.
Where not everything that he thought of or conceived of
needed to
made it into the final product.
It's like, there's this is the end result. This is what Tolkien wanted to present to the world. They want, like, here's Lord of the Rings. Everything else is probably like.
But then there's the director's cut or the extended edition is like, oh, here's
like
the stuff that we took out.
This is more of like, to me, those books are more like the making of.
So in some cases, yeah. I mean, in some cases, like the Lays of Beleriand, there's like new material that. Or the there's like background material and old poems and stuff that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Don't get me wrong.
The deep lore. But then there's those other books like War of the Ring, just earlier versions and like of Lord of the Rings itself. And some of it is extra information that is probably still canon. And then other things are old versions of things that later were changed, like Strider being a hobbit. He's no longer a hobbit. That was an old idea that got discarded, probably for good reason.
Like, all of the ideas were filtered and ended up in the Fellowship of the Ring. I think ultimately, in how Tolkien wanted to roll it, it was that this is just a haunted place, regardless. So if like the idea that the Witch King would come in and activate, like kind of rouse the Wights in September when less than a month before Frodo leaves the Shire. I mean, again, it just seems too happenstance, too coincidental. And again, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I like the idea that the Wights were always there.
It's almost information you'd rather not know.
Yeah. But it's information for me personally, I think should be discarded. Bombadil acted like the Barrow Downs was the ever-present danger, right? Not like, oh, I've heard recently that there's been some kind of shenanigans going on over at the Barrow Downs, so maybe.
Yeah. I've kept my ear to the ground, and I've heard whisperings that Ringwraiths are calling all cars, calling all Wights.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So I think that even though like maybe that was put forth as a theory, or like it was like written about in Unfinished Tales, I don't know how much of that again, like, not that Tolkien didn't write it, but I don't know how much of that actually ended up.
Well, he didn't mention it in Lord of the Rings, so maybe he thought of it as like a possibility, and it could still be a possibility.
It could be,
but
yeah, it could be a possibility.
Tolkien made the decision that it wasn't worth mentioning in the book proper.
That's what I'm saying. So, like, as that, like,
so we can discard it.
Yeah, that's in a roundabout sort of way. Yes,
to me, it's kind of cool, but it's also slightly clunky.
Yeah, but again, it's a convenience. This is like
right.
That to me is some Rings of Power. Wah, wah, wah. That's some Rings of Power type writing that I think Tolkien rightly discarded.